how do you know if the expired is actually worth your time?
You really don't. You really don't initially. But what you need to do in order to get to know if it's worth your time is you have to be able to ask questions that are specific to their motivation. Okay. So initially you go through and you have no clue. You're calling them, you're knocking on their door, and you have no clue. But you got to get into the point where you're asking them questions that are going to lead to their motivation. Loida, what's the benefit of selling this home? What are you guys most looking forward to? Who's actually most excited about getting this property and moving over to Chico? How would it impact you and your family if we were to get your home sold and get you over to Chico? We start asking questions specific to their motivation, then it's going to give us dang, this person is definitely motivated, right? But some of you, unfortunately, what agents will do is they sit there and go, oh my gosh, Loida, you have no idea. I'm the number one agent. Yes, we only have two agents, but I'm still the number one agent. Okay. And my company does all of this other stuff. And I don't know if you know how the picture of our company, and we're sitting there talking about things that have nothing to do with the seller. And that's definitely not the direction you're going to want to go to. It's going to be their motivation is how you find out whether it's worth your time.
Exactly. Motivation. Because I hear all the time too, whether it's expires or even just circle prospecting, sometimes the homeowner will say, well, I wanted $1 million, but you really know it's worth like 600,000. So then
Yeah.
at that point, you know that they're not really motivated. Or you continue to ask a few questions,
Yeah.
but what do you do in those cases when you get someone that's kind of like a smart ass?
Well, you also we have to remember too, because sometimes part of the blame is on the realtor. As I mentioned before, what will end up happening is I am the new licensed agent or I'm the timid agent, and I go on this presentation and I haven't taken a listing in like 6 months, and then I go out there and then you just silly say, well, you know what, can you give me $1 million? I don't know, but let's try. Here's a contract, sign it. And you're like, okay, cool, $1 million. And then you come expired, but because I didn't do my job as the realtor and I didn't pre-qualify and I didn't go through and do my end of the job, now you're expired at $1 million, and even though it's worth 600,000, but Robert, as the realtor now coming in after it expired, I go through and ask you some questions along the line of what do you think stopped the home from selling? And you're like, I don't know. It's like, well, I noticed that you actually were asking $1 million. How'd you guys come up with that price? Well, honestly, I was kind of joking, and the agent just said, yeah, so I went with it. I'm like, okay, well, what's a realistic price that you would consider this time? Well, I know my neighbor Bob across the street, he sold his for 625, and he has a pool. Ours doesn't, but I think if we can get something in that vicinity, we wouldn't be opposed to it. Believe it or not, that stuff does happen with what I just described. But if they're a smart aleck, well, I'm going to still get a little bit deeper on their motivation, because again, we have to remember these people go through 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, right? And then that first week they have showing, second week, maybe they get this, this random offer. Maybe they might get an accepted offer. And then all of a sudden it just kind of goes crickets over time. And then especially on the 6 month ones, they could go a month, 2 or 3 months from the last time they spoke to a realtor or somebody that came and take a look at the house. And then all of a sudden, bam, on Thursday, now all of a sudden there's 75 realtors calling me after 3 months of nothing. So sometimes these smart alecks are like, well, where the hell were you? What were you doing, during this time? So we have to make sure that we're always on the focus of their motivation.
And I'm glad that you brought up the pricing, because many times, especially if there's a newer agent, they might think, well, you know what? A listing is a listing, and I'd rather have something than nothing.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, it's not going to sell. It's going to come off the market. You're probably going to have a pissed off seller, because they're going to be like, well, Robert, you told me you could get me that price, and now you're telling me I have to reduce it, or that it's not going to sell. So you would actually be doing a disservice to that client by taking an overpriced listing.